All right, so it probably is going to get said a lot as time goes on, but we are not experts. We are just curious people that like to talk about things.
Can
And
confirm.
there is for those that go on social media or watch the news or talk to anybody about anything other than general gossip and sports, pretty big thing to talk about going on right now. Has been for a while. Decades, even, one might say.
Yeah, we're pushing that century.
I wanted to do more research before we got to this episode, but I've been so upset with how the uh the response to the college protest has been. I was like, I can't wait. I wanted to be like super informed, but
Yeah.
like with the whole Rafa ordeal and the cracking down on the protest, like it just, oh my goodness. I just
Yeah, it's
this is one of those things that blows
disheartening.
my mind with like how can like it not be clear like from the historical perspective of like students opposing war like is somehow an anomaly like or something that you need to crack down on with a police force. Like we've done this dance before a lot. Like this
Yeah.
is a quintessentially American thing. And time again, the people against the student protest turn out to be wrong, right? Like civil rights,
Well,
Vietnam War, like
I don't know if I would agree that it's a quintessential American thing. Like France is
his,
doing similar things. They're doing big
historically.
shutdowns. Yeah. Um, but like, and yeah, that's definitely kind of been the crux of it, especially since we kind of came out of World War II with all of the power. Um, like we've been the heavy hitting like media like mecca, I guess, if you will. So
Yeah.
everybody's looking to the states because they are the loudest. We're the squeakiest wheel. Um, but like Ireland has had a really good track record of like having solidarity with people who've also been colonized. I think it's important to remember that these movements have existed all over the world. Um,
Yeah, and to some
we
degree, like
it's just easy
Ireland
to
is
focus
still
here.
occupied.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. 2024. It's the Star Trek Irish independence. We got time.
Yeah, that's always been my problem with the ordeal is ugh, I wonder where I don't think Spotify cares. YouTube might not be happy with this episode. But like people, trying
Fuck
to
up.
legitimize the state of Israel. I haven't heard anybody make a good case for the state of Israel. Like
Mhm.
like oh well like they deserve a homeland and like in the historical context and we talk about this on the episode where we had technical difficulties, but like it was at a time when there was still like colonial and imperialism in the world. So like historically, it was like one of the last big imperial colonial like projects. Um,
Yeah.
but that's what it is. So when people try and defend it as a project, right? Um, you
Mhm.
can't get away from the fact that that's like a fundamental
Well,
aspect of it.
yeah, I would say that Israel has about as much right to exist as America or any other country. Like they aren't inherent rights. They were It's stolen land. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like for me, there's a certain amount that you can go back and sort of rectify things. Like reparations is it's something I believe in, but it's also if you follow everything back and you just keep trying to bring everything back till we've just um like every bit of our lineage has committed some atrocity and some theft, and it's impossible to track all of it. And at a certain point, it's not necessarily feasible to say that everybody should have their ancestral land back. Um, Not that I don't think that certain indigenous peoples should have a lot more say than they do. I think that is an important place to get to. But when we
Mhm.
get into this conversation of like one state and two state solutions, that is vastly different than like, hey, we're all here in America. Like none of us really asked to be here. This was all our grandparents coming over, and we know we fucked you over, but like let's still get along. This is an active apartheid. Um, and like I absolutely think a one state solution is
Yeah, because
possible. Like, go ahead.
but is it this is the other thing, is it's an ethno state. That's the thing that makes it all the more like, because America works, right? And again, your point about like even our relationship currently with indigenous people from America, um I think First Nation is like the proper term
Mm-hmm.
now. They still don't have the weight and the integration in the sense of like rights and like recognition. Um, but the avenue is there to some degree because
Right.
if they're American citizens, they're American citizens. Um, and still, yeah, we got problems
Well,
there. That's a whole nother
that should be
conversation.
their
But having a
option.
specific thing,
Yeah. Sorry, is
yeah.
our
But with
like
the one state solution, the trouble is, huh?
sorry, I think we might have a bit of a
Breaks up.
lag, but go ahead.
No, it's is there a lag on the audio or the video?
I feel like I
If
keep
it's the
talking
audio, I'm gonna
over
blame
you,
your
even
Bluetooth
though I've waited
headphones,
for the
fancy pants.
pauses. Yeah, maybe.
That's why I use the corded ones. But we'll just have to make
Well,
sure to pace ourselves. We talk over each other anyways. We're talkers.
mhm.
So I'll finish my point quick, which is when people talk about the one state solution, it's okay, yeah, but then it's Israel as it is claiming the rest of the land, and then in some way integrating the rest of the Palestinians. And there was a video recently that surfaced. I think it's a Jewish settler. Well, an Israel settler. We gotta be careful with these words here. So an Israel settler, uh, who outright says that we should own all the land and govern it, and that's how you get the one state solution. So it's like when people talk about the one state solution, it's not a just all these people live in this area, they vote democratically with equal rights. Like that typically isn't how it's pitched.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're absolutely right about first world um, or First Nations peoples like not having nearly enough seat at the table, and that is exactly what would happen. Like if you kick everybody out and then grant like those like hand-picked returns, then it's a second class citizenship already. Um, and like that is I don't think the current Israeli government could manage this. Like they couldn't implement a one state solution, nor do I think they want to. But I think if a coalition was created and said, "Hey, this has been going on for far too long. We need to be protecting like all the peoples of Israel." Um, I don't think it would be possible to keep that name, but
But yeah, I mean that's tough because like I think that the name like of Israel is older than the term Palestine.
yeah, it might be.
So,
Um,
but it was Judea before that. But yeah, but it's, yeah, rather than being Israelis, it's the people of the land of Israel, or however you want to call it. Because that's one of those
Mhm.
funny technicalities that like most Palestinians have more like Judaic
DNA and lineage.
heritage. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The people of the land of Judah, like,
Yeah.
which is back to the point about it's like it's a European ethno-colonial state, which is just kind of in bad taste for a while
Well,
now. Which
and
it's
it's
specifically.
also.
Oh,
Mhm,
sorry.
go ahead.
I would say I just want to emphasize the point. It's this particular regime, which has a
Mhm.
lot of support, which is part of the like. It's not just the government. There's a populist support element to it, um, but it's not that you can't that it couldn't be changed with, like you said, a coalition. Like there is internal ways this could change drastically.
Um, sorry, I forgot. I don't even have a way to hook my stuff up with the cord. I thought I did.
Wah wah.
Um, yeah, yeah, because the regime is interesting. Like, so I'm assuming you're including the past 80 years, essentially, like kind of from. I'm not even sure when the Nakba happened um, in that history. Um,
Again, we're not
but like,
experts.
yeah, but like, so 75 years ago, when Israel was like branded a country, it is that where the beginning of the what was the word you used, the regime started, or are you talking about like the Netanyahus because they've been kind of a family in power for a few like for two generations?
Yeah, so the regime, when I say regime, I'm talking about the Netanyahu thing. I have,
Mhm.
like, to me, this is the whole problem when people try to defend the very project of it, is like, I, it's like, it has the right to defend itself, but it's like, it was imposed upon people. Like, it was an occupying, like, project, kind of to begin with. Now, there could have been ways to
Yeah,
integrate it and stuff like that, but, like, the whole thing started messy. And again, you have people that are direct descendants, and then you have people who are closer related to Europeans, except for their religion and their culture. Um, but like they don't have the heritage to the land coming in and imposing. Like so, there's two things, both of them problematic to me.
well, and I mean that's another one of my issues with religion in general. It's very nebulous, and that works. Like that's a really good way to enforce like ethnostates and enforce like theocracies because you can fudge the numbers quite a bit. It's very different when you're saying, okay, well, we have to like if you get into the real like uh, eugenics of it, you say, okay, well, only these people that test this, this, and this in 23andMe or whatever. Like that's also a terrible way to do it, but it's like you can't kind of pretend at it as nearly as much as like being anti-Zionist is being anti-Semitic. That's a pretty fucking wide reach, and like here we
Well,
are.
because
Like that's
because there apparently there's a monopoly on the word Semitic.
yeah. Like
as if Hebrew is the only
pretty sure
Semitic
Arabic
language.
is a Semitic language. Yeah, yeah.
Wild, wild times we live in.
And it's I think you're right that this. I don't know if we said it actually on the episode or um, just before, but the thing that is bringing it to everybody's attention and the thing that I think is pushing the needle is these kids like in colleges and like they made those brave steps and they're getting the shit kicked out of them, and that is it's so crazy to me. Like I it very likely could have blown out if they waited a semester.
Yeah,
If they're like,
let them get bored, let them take their summer
yeah, they're
vacation.
like, okay, we'll come to the table. Like, let's wait for everybody to get their finals done, and then you're losing leadership when like this when people graduate, and like you shake things up. I shouldn't be giving advice like this. But now that we've kind of got the ball rolling, like that was a big fuck up. Like pitting these kids against the cops, like they already fucking hate cops. Like this is it's the most anti-authoritarian generation I've seen like in ages. Like and it's different than like the hippies of the 60s. I think and hope because they seem to be like they're way more educated. They have way more resources as far as like learning about history like and seeing these atrocities like at the minute they're happening. And it's cool and it's scary and I'm so proud of them. And when you have those kids who are not violent, like it's just easily verifiable that they were sitting there, they were having church and Shabbat and just like just sitting in. And when you send cops after people like that, it pisses off donors. Like I think Columbia has had a halt on like $60 million of alumni funding. Like that's a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
And you love to see it.
Yeah, and it's this is one of those things where I feel like we should be smarter, including I guess quote unquote the bad guys, the politicians. But like we should be smarter as a society because we know psychologically that if you have protest or riots or confrontations, the more authority figures you place, the more policing and pressure you put, the more likely it is to escalate. Right? Like if there's nothing to escalate
Oh
against,
yeah.
it's more likely to either maintain a neutral energy or peter out.
Yeah, it's the difference between a firecracker in your hand and a firecracker on the ground, or in your fist or your palm, I should say. Like, yeah, you're gonna blow the shit out of it if you put too much pressure on it.
Well, yeah, they have nobody
And that,
to yell at if there's not a
yeah,
fucking row of militant police standing there.
and and like, there's also something to be said for even if you feel you're 100% in the right, if nobody is like pushing back on you, like, well, if everybody agrees with me, who cares? Like, and nothing is getting done. Um, I think the divestment is really perfect. Like the idea of going after the money specifically, and going after specific like arms deals. Like,
Well, and
have
it's
you read any? Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it just the reaction has emboldened people more than anything because it when people are like, oh, this stuff doesn't change things. Bullshit. Like, one, we know it changes stuff. It has changed stuff
Yeah.
forever. And then
Mm-hmm.
two, it wouldn't be getting cracked down on so badly if it wasn't working.
Yeah. No, like it absolutely shows how scared these people are, and good. They should be more scared.
Yeah,
I
for Americans to be against passionate resistance when that is like the thing that made us happen. Also, one of my
yeah.
things, like,
Nobody has asked me to. Okay, go ahead.
like Hamas is a very nuanced topic. That was one of the things I did
Sure.
research in recently. Um, and it turns out like it's got quite a history.
Mm-hmm.
In more good ways than I think people understand. But the concept of violent resistance against an oppressive colonial power was the American story. Violent resistance against a colonial power. Like the Revolutionary War wasn't the revolutionary, hey, could you stop that?
Yeah. Nobody asked me to condemn the Sons of Liberty.
That always blows my mind. It's blown my mind since I was young. It's what made me so
Mm-hmm.
rebellious and anarchistic. Like, really?
Yeah. And I can't stop thinking about like I've been listening to and rereading the Declaration of Independence, and it's like have any of you conservatives read this? It like this is exactly your fucking bread and butter. Like how can you not be just drooling over the fact like that you get to root for your team? Like this is the good guys.
at least the good cause, because my trouble, like,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that Hamas is without um some places to criticize for sure.
because my stand early on, as a bit of American isolationist, is, one, it's not something the American people, right, taxpayers and stuff like that, should be getting involved with. Two, it is between two opposing, like, religious cultural things, and Hamas and their, what people call the new charter, but it's not officially a charter, but like their new statements on their organization, um, still is part of like the Islamic global domination like block. So as somebody who is pretty critical of religion, I'm like, I don't want either of these to get too much. So if we're just talking
Right.
about events on the ground, like, it's obvious one group is just trying to get its foothold as a people with basic human rights, and the other, like, I, I tried to find like good Israeli arguments from their spokespeople, from people that were like pro-Israel, and I can find nothing that doesn't sound awful.
Yeah, and it's because like they are the blueprint for American propaganda. Like they've been testing this. They have a lot smaller demographic to deal with, and they have their borders shut down. Like they're kind of surrounded on all sides. Um, and like they have their critical enemy inside. So it's like you really get to control the narrative when you have something like that. Um, I've been watching some videos where there's one specific guy who he goes on like a chat roulette style thing. It might even be that. Um, and Israeli people will recognize him and just like we and just like shout at him and go bananas. And he's very calm and like trying to give the best arguments for not being murdered. And they're just not having it. It's like that's such a level of dehumanization that like you were talking to somebody face to face and you want to like hurt them. Like to you want them to feel terrible for existing. And that's insane to me.
Mhm. Yeah, and when Hillary Clinton comes out defending your country, not a good look. Like, and then even Mitt Romney was like, "Yeah, the PR has been really bad on this. We don't understand." Okay, because
Don't
the
you?
PR, like, they're not even trying to hide it. That's one of those another one of those crazy
Yeah.
things is they're like, yes, 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 like, we're trying to defend ourselves by wiping them all out. Like, they can't help themselves. Like,
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's, and with the whole October 6th thing, it's like, oh, and that's when it started. That is not when it started. A simple
yeah.
search, a simple, like, shallow level of digging will be like, no. Like, this had
Mhm.
decades of lead up. It wasn't a sudden, like, unprovoked, no reason whatsoever. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a ridiculous narrative.
And the like I haven't seen such like gleeful cruelty from people since like the Abu Ghraib pictures came out. It's like they don't give a fuck who sees. They think they're absolutely not going to be called in for this. Like they don't view these people as people, and you've got to have reached a point where your brain is a little bit broken. Like that is what happens. Like when you dehumanize that much, that's the only way you can be that kind of cruel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like I've seen so many videos from the IDF. Like this is the face that you want to put on the story. That's insane.
Or even Netanyahu, like, outright being like, America can't do anything to us. Like, we have them by the balls. It's like, as an American, I'm like, what? Like, is this a thing? Because this needs to stop, like,
Yeah,
now.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, that which is my reason for like I was hesitant about us doing this kind of episode one because like I prefer to be more fully informed of the current and
Mhm.
historical events. But there's too much just outright current elements of like foreign government like clearly is
Mhm.
dictating politics on a bipartisan level. It's
Yeah.
leading to the ban of TikTok, which then again an American politician said outright that like yeah we like on these new forms of social media where the people actually connect, we can't control the narrative and we don't like that. They admitted that. So it's like
Mhm.
outside of all the other like direct elements of the historical conflict, just as an American, like watching police like crack down on student protest, watching our politicians keel to a foreign power and clamp down in an authoritarian way on the American people, like all that stuff separate from the actual conflict is
Mhm.
ridiculous and upsetting.
Absolutely. Um, is it Robert Evans who's on Behind the Bastards? I think so. But he's like he he also did an episode. He did one on the Netanyahu's, and he comes to the table and he says, "Parts of this are very complicated, and we are not going to know the answers for how to get a one-state solution or how to rectify the damages that has been done. But it is a genocide. It is an apartheid state. Like those things aren't like they aren't complicated,
Mm-hmm.
despite them despite everybody wanting to bring all of the the whole Middle East and every conflict that has ever happened into this to say it's too complicated for you to understand. Some things are, but not like differentiating between citizens. Like you have different license plates. That's fucking crazy. So again, some things simple, some things aren't. And the simple thing is, you shouldn't kill kids, and that is it's crazy to see how many people have gone from they killed Israeli kids to killing Palestinian kids is killing terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're creating the terrorists. You know that, right? Like the
And
only
they
thing
do,
these kids can be is freedom fighters, I should say.
and they do know that.
Like
That's also been
yeah,
made
yeah,
clear.
yeah, that's
It's
true.
easy to keep a conservative, authoritarian government in power when there is a militant enemy to fight.
Yes.
Cough, cough, George Bush. uh,
Did you see that it was the Edinburgh portal?
oh, yeah.
Have you seen anything about it? The Bush did 9/11.
Yeah. So, quick, like, aside, I was gonna post a video about it of kind of like, this is why humans can't have nice things. Because, like, the technology is incredible. Like, it is mind blowing. And it's
Yeah.
people trolling each other, it's nudity, it's like, yeah. It's like,
I just don't have a problem with any of those things. Like,
yeah, yeah, I mean, I get it, but I also feel like it's just underappreciated as a phenomenon.
yeah, that's true. But so I haven't looked into any of the technology. What is so astounding about it?
That's a good question because it could just be a big screen with a, you know, FaceTime video going. Like,
That's kind of what I assumed.
yeah, it's still cool though because I
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that I get blown away every time I do a video call. Not like this where it's like
Mhm.
a separate camera and a microphone and a computer. Like on phones, that was the most sci-fi shit up and
Mhm.
through the 80s and even the 90s. Like that was
Yeah.
sci fucking fi. And we were just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like video call you. It's like, no, that was we thought we were gonna be interplanetary at the same time we had video calls. Like
Yeah. It's funny.
and I wanna be just excited about all the cool shit, but people keep being assholes.
And yeah, maybe maybe it's because there is still a level of anonymity. Like, what are the Brooklyn cops going to do to me in Edinburgh if I flash the entire
Uh,
plaza? But like, I like that kind of connection. I like being able to be irreverent with people. I think that's a really healthy way to engage. And I don't. There's absolutely a different like when it gets into levels of like sexuality. You got to be careful with that stuff. Like consent is really important. And it's very hard to get with stuff like that. But like telling dark jokes and having those like raucous friendships, even if you don't understand the language, sometimes you can just get the vibes and enjoy each other. And I think that's really cool.
something kind of distinctly human about it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, I the more this uh decade, this century has kind of moved on, the more I try to optimistically cling to the it's gonna get worse before it gets better kind of narrative, because the expose that's come from the attention on the Israel-Palestine conflict, like I said, with the police state, the like bought out politicians, and the organization that's coming with it, because like the blockout 2024,
Mm-hmm.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, I not great as somebody who's trying to build a platform as like a
Mm-hmm.
personality, but like for us, we've told you this before, but like our whole thing is we plan to build entirely on Patreon or like built-in ads like
Mm-hmm.
YouTube stuff, but we refuse to like take sponsorships or like have us advertise things. Um, but because we saw with like the Patreon, it makes us accountable to the community to like
Yeah.
you know do like a certain quality, conduct ourselves a certain way, but the most importantly is how we spend the money. Although I guess you do have like people that say they're men of God and then go buy private jets, but in our minds,
Should
having
we ask for seed money?
yeah, in our minds, the concept of like tying our main income to Patreon, which is our hope, is that like it, if somebody sees us talking about all this, goodwill and community building, then we go off and buy, fucking Lamborghini, they just pull the money, right? Like it's just gone. Um, and I refuse on principle to get tangled up into corporatism and advertising. Like if we're gonna do stuff, we're gonna take the money and we're gonna build other projects that bring in money. But those other projects also have to be in the same vein, because otherwise we would lose this, the initial support. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
this, in theory, this fail safe to keep us on track. Not that we, in our minds, we don't need it, but it's put our money where our mouth is, as it were.
Yeah.
But so yeah, loving this whole rebellion, like just you've seen the let them eat cake thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so just like, yeah, there's this war thing going on, like everyone's focused on that, and then the celebrities are like, hey, could you pay attention to us because we've got this party we're doing, and the theme is
Like,
how
yeah,
like
we could absolutely pay attention to you.
yeah, yeah. Oops. Priceless. So good. So good. And the Hunger Games stuff, I just went
Oh
through and
yeah.
rewatched the whole series. Okay, hold on. I don't like posting like the stitched or like
Mm-hmm.
cap cut like kind of content on the Metametheus, uh like TikTok and stuff, but I wanted to so desperately take the stuff from Snow, because I basically did the was it Leonardo DiCaprio like pointing at the TV thing, because
Oh yeah.
she goes to see the people at the hospital and he's like, well, you know what the rules are. If you associate at all with the Mockingjay, bomb them, bomb the hospital. So not only do they do the same logic, like, well, there was somebody from Hamas there at some point,
Yeah.
so it's justified. Like it's one of those weird like fiction predicted reality where I'm like, what the fuck?
Mm-hmm.
And then with the Met
Well, I
Gala
mean,
going at the same time, it's like wild.
yeah. No, we've been itching for a reason to start biting heads off rich people. Like, just remember Ocean Gate wasn't that long ago. Like, we like collective cheering for death. That's insane. But also, this is people suffering the consequences that they usually hoist off on poor people.
Mm.
And
Yeah, so that's my like I'm optimistic that these terrible things are happening, but it's actually bringing us all together because we have a means to come together in ways that we didn't have before. Now, the
yeah,
pessimist of me would say the quote unquote enemy knows that and they're going to try and crush it before it reaches its critical mass point, which is the
well, I
classic
mean,
conspiracy theorist
isn't that
rebel.
what the TikTok bans are?
Uh-huh. Yeah. But, I know you don't like it, but Elon Musk has been toying with opening up Vine again through X because he owns the rights to it. But like there's a good chance that you could see an organic, and this is why people get excited about Elon doing the Twitter thing, is because he represents at least to like give a fuck what the government thinks. But like you could have an all American version in theory. So like that energy has to go somewhere. It doesn't seem like it'll hold. Also, they're gonna have a real hard time fighting it in courts, so they either have to get more heavy-handed, which is just gonna create more pressure, or it's gonna get dragged down the courts and not happen. So,
Yeah, I'd say that it doesn't seem likely that they'll be able to just do it like with one swift blow. Um, but that's not typically how we do things. We death of a thousand cuts, right? So like there'll be this ban, and then things will get like some things will get sold, and like they'll try to like influence the algorithms and like change it enough to where they can get a handle on it. Um,
yeah, hot take. I would rather the company that like uh interacts with TikTok be communist China than to be the American government.
yeah, I get that.
I've done this rant
Like,
before. People talk about data. Yes, it's powerful. Yes, there's a lot you can do with it, but it is so much harder to do anything other than like algorithm style marketing than people give credit for.
yeah, and yeah, it would be really hard for China to get rich off of. I mean, they still sell to us, but there's like Biden just introduced more tariffs like this week.
Well, and
So like,
this is the beauty of the modern economic system. We need each other economically, and as a in an
yeah,
actual war, America will still crush anybody. So it's not like there's a fear. What are they gonna do with random consumer data? Like
mhm.
sell us more shit? Like is that what they're afraid of? Like
Well,
hashtag Timu.
the fear is that they would influence us into not needing the things that are for sale, right?
But
Like,
that affects them because they're the producers of it. And there's
well,
the
yeah, but they're already not getting our money. Like, when you have to spend twice as much to get the same thing from China, and like I don't remember which one. I think it was EVs. EVs have 100% tariff. Like, why would you do that? Like,
hmm.
it would be better for us to all be like off gas. Like it's a pretty simple thing that would help with the environment, but you it'd be one thing if he introduced those jobs first and then put hikes up those tariffs so
Yeah.
that people aren't trying to like globalize and cut the workers in the states out. That's absolutely not what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see here. I I don't know. I I can't quite imagine how this is all gonna play out because I guess I was more hopeful that the American political system was more democratic than it is.
Hmm.
Because that's been one of my biggest things is just the flagrant not caring about the voting populace. And this is where you hear this every single time this kind of shit happens. You have to uh, put your money where your mouth is, right? Use your dollar vote, and you have to get to the elections. Like, you have to hit them where they care, their money and their election.
Hmm. But more and more, it seems like they don't care about the election.
Which is
Like the Democrats
concerning, yeah.
don't. Yeah, it's a huge fucking deal. Like the Democrats aren't reaching out to anybody. They don't give a fuck. They're not changing their opinions. I think the statement that Biden made about if like about pulling back on
A handful
our
of weapons.
yeah, like that's a step in the right direction for sure, but like give it some fucking teeth and you'll pick up these voters. Like everybody wants to be anti-genocide, and the fact that you're leaving those votes on the table is a fucking insane.
Or just have an adult conversation about it, for fuck's sake. Like, the yeah, it's the
But to have an adult conversation, somebody else would have to donate the same amount that APAC has in a pretty generous way. Like they've got to come to the table with insane perks because that's what he's been getting from Israel for a long time. I think while he was in Congress, he was the person who took the most in his lifetime from Israel. Like that's a
go ahead.
lot.
Let's run the track back, right? Because the history of all this is where it gets interesting. Where did Israel get that money? Oh yeah, us. We built up their infrastructure. We built up
Yeah.
their economy. The American taxpayers are paying for another country to influence our elections. This tax shit
Yeah.
is out of fucking hand. And even Warren Buffett was like, if you just made the top 800 companies pay, regular people wouldn't have to pay these taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Math, yo.
Yeah. I and the thing is like now I don't even think I do think that would help. Like when you get a certain amount of money, like things will have to start getting better. Um but we have so much money and it's all being spent. First of all, it's all being hidden and then spent. So
Mm.
like so many failed audits like and you're right, like this like circle jerk style of send to different countries so they can send money back as lobby money. Like that's bananas.
Yeah, so the memes that come out of everything, like meme culture is one of my favorite things. And there's memes that are like traditional memes, and there's memes that are just like uh cultural moments that are more frequent because of the social media. the
Mhm.
the construction car ramp in I think it's some European country, but you've seen it, right? Where like they're doing
Oh
construction
yeah.
on the road,
Yeah.
so they roll in a fucking ramp like, wait, that's an option? Like,
Mhm.
where the fuck is our tax money going?
Pretty fucking infuriating.
This is where a little bit of like good patriotism would help, right? Because that's one of the things is like these people clearly aren't patriots. They don't care about the well-being
Mm.
of America as a country. They're not making us a industrial like powerhouse. They're not making our economic like strength through the population strong. They're not caring about the infrastructure. They're unpatriotic. Eh, Yeah, it just and not in the like they don't like believe in God and conservatism. No, like founding fathers were
Mhm.
progressive deists. Like now, it's unfortunate that there was a large Puritan population, and this is where people get tricky about democracy, because that large Puritan population was good at organizing and voting.
Mhm.
History.
Yeah. the well, and I always say this about patriotism, like you can't be a patriot and think that your country is the best. Or maybe you can, but you can't think that it's perfect because you have to constantly be pushing it to be better. That's what patriotism is. Nationalism is saying we're the best, don't need anything to change. Everybody else should aspire to be us. And that's useless and dog shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just stops. It's the same thing we talked about that conversation we had a while ago about like it's conservatism in that you are going to stop moving, you're going to stop progressing. And that's why Japan has way better infrastructure than we do. And like lots of these other countries are like leaps and bounds ahead of us, while like, oh well, they're just like so innovative. Like, no, we could do that. We could be those heavy hitters if we decided that we wanted the lives of the people to be better instead of to be able to blow the world over 3,000 times instead
Which
of 2,000.
some of that is a cultural uh problem, maybe even a cultural bug. Uh
I would say it's a
because
cultural
America,
virus.
well, in the sense that like America does not have the cultural conformity or homogeny that almost any other country has. We are like distinctly diverse in ideas, populations, and cultural elements. Um,
Mhm.
so it's very hard when people talk about the conservative, like make America great again type thing. The real underlying thing that is actually good in that is the concept of an American culture. Now that needs to be updated because the way it was done was poor, but that ideal of a unified American like vision is a positive thing that we could and probably should start trying to rally around, at least until we can get to the point where we can see ourselves as, earthlings, but we got to work through stages to get there.
Well, I mean, I think we absolutely have an American culture. Like, if it's at the very least we have trauma bonding, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
there is something that we take from not having security in our healthcare, or and when we watch um, certain rights erode, like that is promoting culture. Like everybody is taking something from that. We could be taking completely different things from it. Um, and it's probably just a sense of grandeur. Like it's impossible to codify people across 2,000 miles. Like when my needs are completely different than somebody in Idaho or like Colorado or like Maine, like that. Like because we are so different, like they, it's hard to build up that solidarity. But I think things like TikTok are actually doing a really good job at that. Like the social media blitz has been incredible as far as like finding friends and finding communities and finding like healthy ways to express things that we just like that have been blocked for lots of people for a long time. And that's very cool, but it's also like it's hard to do meaningful shoulder to shoulder work and rebellion. Like that's the big thing. It's like I can find a million people who think just like me, but they're scattered. Like it's 5,000 in a city, 100 in another town, and like the fist of the million it's a big fist, but you've got to like bring that all together.
Well, it's not a fist; it's an
And
open hand. Is the trouble? You're trying to punch somebody fingers out,
yeah, yeah.
which is one of the biggest things. Is that we need to circle the power back from a digital connection to the like individual communities. Like
Mm.
that is one of the biggest things. It's one of the first like so we're the Metametheus project, not Metametheus podcast, because like there's this laundry list of things that like as we reach certain milestones of progress and success we're gonna do. And top on the list is like focus on digital community, but more importantly, local communities. We'll start with like communities we're in, but we plan to like try and build a um, kind of a decentralized program that like we do show it works and then can outsource so each community can like build its strength. Because that's one of the things I've been thinking about with the conflict is that if you want to stop conflicts like that from happening, or you want to have a better power base to influence that type of thing from where you're at, you need stronger communities. You need stronger, like, it's, the stronger middle class thing, but ultimately comes down to stronger communities. The stronger the actual real life, not digital communities are, um, ultimately the more power they have to create meaningful change. And I
Well, I
think that's
mean,
something that gets
I
lost.
wouldn't undercut the digital communities,
Well, for sure.
especially when you look, yeah, but like especially when you look at things like Gamergate, like the amount of power that they wielded was it was colossal, super dangerous, super like worrisome, but that doesn't mean that that isn't a like an interesting place to learn things from, at the very least. Like this is a toxic culture. You shouldn't take the culture, but there is power in this kind of group like action. Um, and that's like we've talked about the hegemony of the right, where like you
Hmm.
have monoliths, and it's very easy to wield power that way. Um, and and that's why leftists don't have them, because I don't want to wield power that way. I don't want to have the kind of influence that Elon Musk does, in that I can have a bad idea and it affects a million people, or a good idea and it affects them. Like, that's too much pressure based on the amount of bad ideas I have, and everybody has.
Right.
And so, like, even if you think that he's a genius, no genius has never had a bad idea. Like, that's just like where you're at. So when you have certain amounts of power, that trickle down like damage just continues to what's the term? It's exponential. Like, it can hurt a lot. Like, I don't think most people would say that one president could do as much as we're now kind of recognizing Reagan for doing. But like, that's a big shotgun blast in the future, and we should be aware of that.
Yeah, which is where the block out 2024, I think there's like two layers of it. There's the people that just want kind of the virtue signaling from celebrities, and then there's the
Sure.
underlying like root system that needs to blossom of the
Yeah.
like we don't want these types of people anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the worship of celebrity,
Right.
and the worship of wealth. Um, like I like there are plenty of leftists and communists who are like, hey, this is bad. We've been saying it's bad. It's great that you're coming to the table and you're doing this. Um, but if the idea is um like pressure them into standing up and using their platform, then you're gonna have to give like to return some of that like favor when the time comes. We just have to be aware that there's a diversity of tactics. Like, not everybody has to be a fan of Eat the Rich, but when we have movements like micro movements like this, where there are plenty of reasons to do it, but not everybody is doing it for the same reason. Like, that's a good place to start the movement and to start conversations. So everybody who's blocking right now might not give a shit about people becoming billionaires, but you can absolutely talk about them. Like, well, this person was a billionaire. They had so much to say, and they attacked, like, J.K. Rowling attacked trans people, or like so and so is attacking Palestine. That's a direct conversation that this is opening up, and I think that's really good. But you don't have to hold everybody to the standard of you need to stay on this path forever. Um, Despite that being something that I enjoy, like, and think is going to be good for whoever joins that like that path.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how it plays out. Definitely, like I said, with my hopes and optimisms, I hope we see like 'cause the way I see it is from a resource standpoint is that the resources that are being pushed into like the celebrity culture could be redistributed amongst a middle class creator like economy, right? It's my whole like obsession with the local community type thing. Um, Rather than giving these stars millions, like you give that attention and those resources to more small creators. So that way, rather than one person owning 8 houses, 8 people can at least get a house. So I'm kind of hoping it moves that direction.
Yeah. So grabbing onto these like these nuggets, these bits of solidarity, I think is key. I think this is a great place to start. And like going back to Ocean Gate, like that was pretty significant, where we watched a shift in the zeitgeist. Like that was like super noticeable. So you can like grab onto this and like, okay, this like the people are not happy with the Kardashian style like gauche, like I used another term for it, is like bohemian gauche. It's like, oh, I'm so quirky and insanely rich. It's interesting, and that's why it's like kind of been so pervasive. But the minute that you see that these people aren't for anybody but themselves, they they kind of start to shatter. Um, so I think you're right. Like these are the tiny little moments that are like maybe rungs on a ladder. Like we're grabbing hold of them, and that's really good to see. But people are gonna start getting hurt, and that's like the thing that we've always got to keep an eye out for. That's what happens in revolutions. Um,
Yeah, it's good. Like it. That's part of my thing with like trying to imagine how it plays out. Like it's having this be smooth. There is a way that it is smooth overall. Historically, that's not how it happens. Eventually, it'll have to happen that way, but I don't know if this is that eventuality.
well, I mean, we haven't gotten here smooth.
Right.
Like we're not gonna get out of it smooth. Um, that would take Deus Ex Machina, right? Like we'd have to have a completely different, unbiased entity come in and fix all the problems.
Well,
And even that people would rebel against.
there's a, at least from my perspective, there's a critical mass point of the development of human society where enough people are fed up and engaged enough that it does like a full move that just can't be resisted.
No, I completely agree. Like that is how it works. It's you're getting over the hump of the hill, and like it starts to roll downhill. But that's never happened with 100% of the population. There have always been the like
It doesn't need to be
the
100% though.
outside bits of the community. Well, but you're saying you want it to go smoothly. Like
It just needs to be
those
a
outside those
majority.
outliers are, well, yeah, like that is a good way to like to create a functioning like society and movement. Those outliers are the ones who are so disenfranchised that they do get violent. Like you can't aim for the middle and please them.
Mhm.
And the people on those far outliers are the ones who are willing to get violent. They're the tankies and the alt right? Not saying that one is like I personally think that one is more worth fighting for than the other, but that's just the nature of like large action. Like you're going to piss off certain people, and when you're doing moves that involve people's lives and livelihoods, that's when people get violent. So like that's the bumps that I think of when I think of a smooth transition. Now, smoother than the French Revolution, I'm really hoping for.
Yeah.
But if we don't get it, like kill me quickly, before I get as eye twitchy as Robespierre. It'll be fine.
Well, and not as intense as it could be with like a nuclear winter, right? Where we're like the whole
Right.
world just hits a big reset button, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not not like middle extreme, not far extreme, like
Yeah.
just bumpy.
Yeah.
We can hope.
Yeah. And bumpy is what history is.
Yeah.
Like we've had some real bad bumps. We're watching them now. Like we're at a point where we can take all of those things and try to do the like for like act on for the greater good. The greater good. But yeah, it's gonna be tough.
I can't
It's
help but think like I keep emphasizing that I think the focus on community should be the single biggest focus if we want
yeah.
it going as smooth as possible. Like economically, pulling money out of like the elite class and into the like the population. Um,
Well, but there you have it. Like, how do you? When I was in the Marines, I did a calculation, and to buy out your contract, I think it was about, I want to say like $300,000. I don't remember what the specific number was, but at the time, I took that number and I said, "Well, how much money does Bill Gates have?" And he had enough money to buy every single contract out in the Marine Corps, and like that's a literal army that he has the resources to buy.
mm-hmm.
Like that's that's a king, like essentially a a free radical government that we have allowed to get to that state. So now if you want to dethrone him, you have to take that money away.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen. Like rich people and the people who value currency the way that our Congress does can't do that with like the push of a button. It would have to be like a slow, drawn out process. And people who are having that kind of power taken away exercise it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that those are the death throes of tyrants. And like we've talked about like having that kind of money changes your brain. Like there's a certain amount of empathy that I feel that these people have built themselves up to, like almost a godhood, in that they can't relate to the people who they need things from anymore. And so like it's okay to use them as tools, um and they can't imagine those tools rebelling against them, and being like the righteous version.
Well, that's like one of the key things you said there was like, oh, they'll use their power. Their power is us. The power is always
Well,
us. Like they use the
well, what
money
I
to
was
buy.
saying is you can't pull that trigger immediately. So if Congress says we're going to take all of your money away over the next year, and that's like insanely rapid. It's like, okay, this year I'm going to be buying assassins and killing everybody that I can.
Right.
Like, and you can do that when we have a capitalist system where people can't get health insurance. Like people are willing to do terrible things for money in this system.
Right.
So that has to be the system that we fix and rectify.
But
And
that's
when you defang all of those powers, then you can do something like that.
right. But
Sorry, go ahead.
that's where the hope and focus needs to be, and this is why, so was it callback? The digital momentum has to go back to a physical like manifestation, because I don't see how the digital space is going to help each community take care of its impoverished, right? Because like that's one of the things that needs to be like most communities have a open wound in their like ghettos or their bad parts of town or whatever it is, but like that needs to be addressed. We need to get the whole community healthy, and
Hmm.
I don't see how that can happen digitally. I feel like it's not a knock at
Well,
all on the digital momentum in communities,
no,
but
no,
it
I
needs
know.
to come back around.
Yeah, like the space that the electronic world has in that revolution is giving resources. Like, okay, these are ways to grow sustainable foods in your environment.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can take over one building and do hydroponics in it and feed everybody. Like, this is the way to do it. Like, we've crowdsourced. Everybody can work on this. And if we have 2 million people who are experts, it's like, okay, this is the thing. They get in a Discord and they just shoot out numbers. Like, this is a really easy thing to crowdsource because you're like, okay, we need to keep costs down and we need to like improve lives. And you'd say, okay, so the first, like, because like you as a community have your needs, give us that list and we're going to start attacking them. And that is how you can, the electronic side just explodes our productivity, because all of those people can do those, like they can implement those things
But you need
from the
you
ideas
need
of
them
1 million
working
people.
together. That's what people are missing. Is
Well, yeah,
they're not spending enough time with their physical communities to build the bonds, relationships that are required for a mobilization to help itself.
yeah, you're absolutely right.
So then we need to have the mobilization, and then then we use the modern tools to
Mhm.
create the more powerful impact that we never had the potential before.
Right.
But a bunch of people talking about, here's what my community has, here's the problems, and they give them the plans. You still have to go out to 100, 200, 500 neighbors and be like, hey guys, so let's all pull together and buy a building and we'll take turns working. Like, you have to build those relationships, and that's not happening.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to happen. That's to me, that's the big, like, blind spot in everything that everyone's talking about. Like, oh, economy and groceries and war. The fundamental solution to all of it is strengthening the community to inoculate it against the centralized powers.
Mm.
A coalition of communities. But if there's no communities, there's no coalition, centralized powers win.
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
So goes my
but
theory.
I don't. Yeah. I don't think it's a blind spot. I think everybody knows that we're lonely and that we're disconnected. But like, we also feel like it's an uphill battle to fight. Like, and when we find the one friend, like it's like that's how I've been in my adult life. It's been very hard for me to make these connections, and when I get them, it's a small tight knit group. Um, so like, at least for me, it's not a blind spot. We know we need to be better about that, but we've got work and like all of these things that are part of the system that are trying to keep us separated. And it's hard to divorce that from like the actual action. Like, if you're working two full-time jobs, it's really hard to like even have the brain power to go out and interact with people, even at the grocery store.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Um,
You're right. Yeah, and blind spot is not, like, as you say, it is a bad terminology. Yeah, it's
well, no, I think it's a good point to bring up. Um, but yeah, like the awareness is there, and I think that's really important. And talking about it online also important. Like, hey, this is something that we're all feeling lonely. That's a big deal. Like, it's a big thing to admit. It's hard.
and
It's hard to be vulnerable.
I think, to your credit, like, it starts from the digital space, because the physical space is so hard to maneuver in right now. We had to find ways to use the digital space to coalesce momentum that then can, like, breach into everybody's daily lives and their, like, individual communities. Somehow we have to,
Right.
which, like I said, is one of the very first things with the Metametheus project. Once we get enough support, we have a program laid out to kind of, like, test out a way to do that we can then replicate with other creators in their own local communities. But I do think you're right that the power, because of the way it can bring digital communities together, will start from the digital space and then move back to the physical ones, and it'll go, like,
Yeah.
you can't have them happening parallel. You have to have this kind of feedback loop
Mhm.
between the two, to, like,
Yeah, I
build the
think that's a good way to
momentum.
look at it. And I think another important point is like the safety aspect. Like, the internet is not an entirely safe space, but it is hard for people to say, I need to stand up against the cops. I need to go get pepper sprayed today. But it's not hard to say we shouldn't be funding or we shouldn't be funding Israel to kill Palestinians. Like that is, it's so easy for me to say on camera.
Mm-hmm.
Like it takes nothing except the willingness to stand against an idea of people, and that's still intimidating. It's not a nothing step, but it's a good step, and that I think that ramp up allows people to find the communities that they feel safe in, and you can start to build on those. It would be a very different thing for me to go and talk to my boss who's been listening to Sean Hannity for like every day I've known him. Say, hey, I'm a communist. When you listen to this guy who says I should be shot in the back of the head every day, I don't know how to be open with you. How do we fix this? Like, how do I be vulnerable with you in a way that makes us work better together? Like, that's not a safe step to take. Even though I think it might be a good one, I think he could learn a lot, like, from my perspective, just like I'm sure I could learn a lot from his. But
this is where we're getting the stacking things up, because you can, rather than saying that, you can be like, hey man, so how do you like go to the grocery store? Oh, it fucking sucks. Okay, yeah. How do you feel about celebrities nowadays? Oh, they fucking suck, right? Like, so we're slowly building up this like, hey guys, like, turns out we all have the same fundamental problems.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've never been good at that, at the small talk. I've gotten better at it, but I've seen people who do that. There's the bartender who works in the really Republican town, and he just doesn't use his buzzwords, and like everybody's pretty on board once you break through the 3 inches of crust, I think is how he puts it. Like, oh yeah, these people are ready to unionize, like because they're so pissed off at having their money stolen. Like, that's a big leftist step that it's hard to get to subtly for somebody like me.
We're gonna pause because this is the first time in any episode I need a bathroom break.
Okay.
So, restock, drinks, whatever.
Sounds good.
Fix and post.
Come back at, let's see, what time is it? At 9? Yeah.
Totally weird tangent, but I've made the joke to my wife a couple times where I don't remember what the context was. But it's kind of like oh, like, what are you gonna go do? Like, you're not gonna be home, or we're not gonna hang out, or whatever. I was like, no, I'm gonna go like hang out with the guys and drink some beers and just ignore the chores at the house. Like, you go figure it out. Like, no, like I don't do that. This is what we're doing now is me hanging out with the guys drinking. Like, I don't even leave the fucking house to do that. tying it in with the digital space thing.
Yeah.
Me hanging out with the guys is coming down here and hopping on. Like,
Hmm.
what I know about my local community is that I am at much less risk of being being up by my community members that are drunk or the police. So, which is why I want to change it. I would like to be able to go out. You talked
Yeah.
about man, one of the things, and this is where we start devolving into classic Metametheus stuff. Because we started on a topic and now we're moving away, but it's all connected. It is all connected.
Sure.
I don't know how we redo city planning. I've been thinking about that a lot with my own like neighborhoods and stuff like that because it's the pedestrian thing, right? Like
Yeah.
Europe was built with pedestrians because it did that for hundreds and thousands of years. Most of
Mhm.
America was developed as like with cars. So how do we like inverse that? It's this is one of those things about the liberal arts. This is where we're going all over the place, but the concept of design is important, right? Like these concepts of art and design are important because it's much easier to build that community strength when there is a design to the community that facilitates it. Because if we all have to drive to some place to meet up, that's a lot harder than, the whole neighborhood has this hub right in the middle of it
Yeah.
that it's where you
Or
go.
the portal.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Um,
That's a problem I don't know how to solve because I don't know how you
well,
redo
I think a major aspect of that is
tear
one
down
of the.
tear down stadiums, replace them with public squares.
I mean,
Better use of taxpayer
so
money. Damn sure.
yeah, seriously. Um, One of the aspects of art that I find really fascinating, and like specifically art and how it intersects with things like fascism and politics, like the minimalist movement. I like minimalism. I like nice, clean, like looks a lot of the times. Um, but that draws in a certain attitude. It's that things don't need to be examined. Things don't need to be like explored. And when you make 1,000 like cookie cutter skyscrapers like we have in some of our cities,
Ugh.
yeah, it's like, why would I want to walk around in this? Like, it's not giving me. So like, there's the aspect of art. There's also like aspects of like green space, and like there are plenty of design elements that you could like go down 1,000 different rabbit holes with. But just the idea of building something beautiful that is enjoyable to interact with,
And
I think is
and
huge.
we know this is back to my I don't know how the fuck we can be so far along in our development of knowledge and so terrible at our distribution and understanding of it as a like collective society because we know from studies that things like green spaces, things like just playing fucking like pan flute music in an area that like has seen robberies and stuff like that decreases statistically the violent conduct in the area. Beautiful spaces do in fact affect people's psychology to make them better like in their behavior.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's actually one of the areas that I wanted to get into when I got my psych degree. I think design psychology is really fascinating. The only jobs in that are like marketing, and that's disgusting to me.
Yeah.
Like the idea that we need to like twist people's like innate humanness to make money, and I hate it. And that shouldn't stop me from doing something like that because you can still use those design elements for the greater good. Because like when I worked at the hospital, like we've done studies on what white rooms do to people. Like they can literally drive people crazy. And our our psych holding area is white walls with locked doors. And like how can you expect people to like have good outcomes by doubling down on mental issues? And like and I think that's what it gets back to. It's like we should design beautiful things that are good to interact with, and roads aren't, and like our buildings aren't. We used to have really beautiful buildings, beautiful libraries, and like train stations, and now it's all so utilitarian that it's just depressing.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you don't like sit and think about it, it just makes you feel gross. Like makes me feel gross.
Yeah, I back to my like focus on the communities thing. Like it's uh the areas that are impoverished, like it's helping like uplift the people economically, but it's also going into those areas and helping like develop the infrastructure and the design in those areas. We're separate from the concept of like communal spaces for the entire collective. But like, if you have an area that's like unsafe to drive in and unsightly, like as a community, it is in your best interest to fix that. It's like,
But also a lot of the resources in those places aren't available. Like with things like redlining, and like if you've got 1,000 different renters, like, and nobody in the community actually owns the places that they live. Like nobody's going to vote to raise taxes. Nobody's going to vote to like change change things that would like be meaningful, because nobody has that actual concrete like boots on the ground investment.
hmm,
And like so yeah, that's just another uh strand in the web. Like it would be good to have more people who owned things. Like this idea of you'll own nothing and be happy is not true, and it it robs people of a sense of purpose and ownership. Like that sense of ownership matters when you want to make the community better.
well, and even if it's like you're in the community but you're renting, you care, but your landlord doesn't.
Yeah,
So even if you're
but
invested in it,
also again, if you need to pick up and move, if you can, like you have that out.
right?
Like you are not tied to your house the way that some people, like the way that I would say that people in the past have been.
Mm-hmm.
So like the boomer generation, like yeah, like everybody owns a house because you can afford it on a waiter's salary. Like, and that's good. Like when you can
And you
have that sense of pride in your
and
community.
putting down roots, right? Like that's the old saying about it.
Yeah,
The trouble with part of the trouble with the renting like dilemma is it doesn't allow people to put down roots, which
yeah,
like affects their
yeah.
own.
I'm never gonna be able to pass down a house to my son, like, or at least not a house that he had his like first memories in. Like that that matters.
Well, you to your point about the community thing is like if you don't like community, if you're renting it, you can leave. But once you
Yeah,
invest in a property, right? Like you've got a certain skill in the game where, or skill, skin in the game, where it's like, okay, I'm
yeah,
gonna be here a while. So if I want it better,
yeah.
I got to do something about it.
Exactly. And with the system we have now, like how many millennials and Gen Zers are like, I just want to get the fuck out of the country. Like I've felt that way. I don't.
Yeah, I'm.
I feel I have more in common with people who are in these other countries that are taking some of these steps, and I feel like I would be able to find community better in those places, and that's really sad.
Yeah, I'm too much of
Like
American
that's
American for that. Like, fuck them, fuck
yeah.
Europe. Like, we should solve the problems here.
No, I agree with that too, but
I did almost fuck off 1 year after a breakup and just become a full time busker in Europe. I'm a pretty damn good mime.
yeah, that'd be fun.
I was making triple the minimum wage just being a fucking clown that didn't talk.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But I'm I'm too focused on trying to do something, have my life be meaningful, create some kind of change.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and like that is something that I also aspire to, but sometimes it's just easy to feel beat down for so long. And like, I just want to, I just want something like to be able to leave my son a house or something. And like, it seems like I'm just constantly watching things get more and more out of reach instead of the other way around,
Mm.
which is what I felt like was the line that was sold to me. It's just interesting.
Yeah. Huh. Thoughtful silence.
Those are some of my favorite silences.
Yeah, I definitely thought you and I were going to talk a lot more about the Israel-Palestine conflict, but to some degree, like outside of the actual nuances of the like data details and uh sources of, information, like it's pretty cut and dry. Like
Yeah,
on both
like
sides of
me
it.
and you don't have a lot of difference. Like where we can do even a lot of like devil's advocatery.
Had it been just a couple weeks ago, we would have, because we did last time.
Yeah.
And I came in kind of like with my, well, in the Hamas like thing is they want like global Islam. I was like, okay, yeah, like we could talk about that, except for that does come secondary to the current problem. Like
Yeah,
we have the
it's the same
religious
thing with
problem.
the pink washing. Have you have you heard that term, the pink washing?
I you've used it before.
Maybe I have, but that idea of like it's a Zionist tactic where if they see a LGBTQIA
Ah,
plus
yes.
identifier, they're like, well, why are you fighting for them? They wouldn't fight for you. Who gives a shit? Like that's not the fucking point. I'm against genocide, and you're genociding all of the people over there, even the gay ones, even the identity that I have. So that is a problem that comes after we stop bombing them.
Yeah, right. So that's the thing. It's like I wanted to have a fun conversation where I railed against like, these colonial religious like whatever, but like like now that American students are being like affected, now that like it's clear that our tax money and our politicians are like corrupt to a foreign like adversary, I'm like, none of the religious conversations matter really until we get just the
Right.
fucking baseline problems addressed. At least we're probably not gonna get them solved, but
Yeah.
and the pressure's working. I guess that's one of the things I'm kind of excited about,
Yeah.
is that we just need to
Um,
maintain it. Although they have the advantage because summer is coming, which on the one hand does mean people have more free time, but typically they have other things they can do with it. It's not like spring or fall where it's so shitty out you can't go out. Um, it's just like things are limited enough where you need things to do, but you can't do everything. Like after the spring, it's gonna be when we see how things go.
I mean, temperature rises is also when things get violent.
That's
Like
true.
that's a thing that's been tracked. So like if you have that revolution mindset, like it could be an igniting factor. Um, did you watch my videos on like voting third party?
Mm-mm. I mean, yours does not appear
No.
in my feed organically, which is ridiculous. Because this is an example of the phones definitely don't listen and don't like access all of your other computer information, because then they would
Yeah.
clearly know like certain people I
Yeah.
interact with. So
Well, and yeah, we moved away from like texting through the DM thing there, but but when people come out and say that a vote for a third party is the same thing as a vote for
No,
Trump.
I did see that one. Yep. Okay.
Okay. And like that's just not true. Like I recognize that voting for a third party isn't a winning strategy. Um
Until it
but that
is.
isn't necessarily the point. Well, yeah, like until you kind of use that leverage to make it so like your side is never going to win without picking up like another group. Um so what do you think about that? Do you think that like voting blue is going to be the best thing to do, or do you think that going third party is worth some of the discomfort it might like stir up?
I'm 100% a third party thing. You, uh, I love that we're friends now because you challenge me in areas that make me grow a lot. Because like my thing is like go for the Kennedy, and then people like talk about the problems with him. I'm like, yeah, okay, are they as bad as Biden or Trump? Like he's maybe not entirely sane, a little conspiratorial, but how about we all just give a big fucking dick punch to the two parties? He's not as dangerous as Trump, and he's not as fucking corporate corrupt as the current Democratic lineup. So give him 4 years. Let the other two parties be like, oh shit, and then we can go back to like, okay, did you learn your lesson now? You can come on a timeout. Like,
And
because Bernie,
yeah, I
Bernie was
still
always the best choice. God, like if we're gonna be blue in the way that blue pretends to be, it should have been fucking Bernie.
yeah.
Anti-establishment, blue, liberal, career politician, so he understands how it works. He was perfect.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. Um so but yeah, you get into that conversation of like if you give this ground to Trump by voting third party, like that's certainly a possibility. And I've watched breakdowns of it being like with the electoral college system, it's a practical impossibility for a third candidate to win. I don't know if that's if his numbers were completely accurate and on point. Because I don't know how much I believe that the right is um as codified as they were certainly in 2016. Um, but like I'm not 100% sure on that. I just think the conversation is interesting in that if people are willing to die on the hill of I am anti-genocide, I am anti-funding an apartheid state, and if you try any other argument to pick up my vote, you will not get it. Like, laying that groundwork and telling Democrats about it and telling Biden about it and just like repeating it over and over and over. It's the only thing that makes sense to me to say that Biden can can get the support that he needs.
This was unfortunate about the dichotomy of Trump because if Trump did run Democrat, he would do whatever the fuck the populist Democratic movement wanted. The trouble is he's on the conservative populist side because whatever they want, he'll do. He has no opinions, he has no values. He will move wherever gets him elected. So he like if he was, in Biden's position and people were like, genocide, he'd be like, yeah, like, Netanyahu, like, I thought he was good, but he's a bad man now. Like, he would change his position in a heartbeat in response
Yeah.
to the thing. So it's so frustrating that you have the one who refuses to answer to the people because the Democrats have historically been deep in the deep state style, like, corporatism, which is why when, oh God, who greenlit Hillary doing her propaganda speech? Like, that was just satire. Like that seems like somebody made an
Uh,
AI like opinion of Hillary because it was just such bullshit. But yeah, so we have this problem that that group is responsive, but the populace is like set in its way. Then you have the progressive side, which is willing to change and adapt and whatever, and then the leadership just placates but doesn't actually move. Ridiculous.
I can't remember what the the guy's name is. He's the but you don't understand history guy. You know what I'm talking about?
Maybe.
Anyways, he apparently grew up near her, and he's a history expert, and he's like, you shouldn't be telling kids that they don't know what's going on, and especially with your track record. And he said, when they went trick or treating at the Clintons, they gave out the fun size candy bars. And like that is so indicative of the kind of person who knows how to lose the easiest votes in the world. Are you fucking kidding me? Buy king size, you idiot!
Yeah. Although I'll admit, with your criticisms last time, I don't know if it made it onto the last episode we did that will air, or if it was in the first one with the technical difficulties. When I was like, yeah, like get a Kennedy in office. I then saw a clip of somebody asking about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and back to the point of like not taking the easy votes, he hesitated on it. I was like, are you fucking shitting me? Like, and then he started dancing around the topic. I was like, bro, like, you can't act like you're different. And then on this particular issue, like, if you're gonna take a stand, man, just take a fucking stand. Like, even if you don't believe it, like, fucking don't toe that line, because you're gonna.
Well, yeah, like that was the charm of the Kennedys. It's that hey, we're gonna do the right thing, what we think is the right thing, no matter what. And if you can't pull that off, if you appear to be politicking, you're not getting the Kennedy brand. And like, I have my criticisms of the whole family. Like, there's whole issues. But I do think that there were a lot of good and progressive things that were done.
Where's the Roosevelt descendant? Maybe that's what we need. We need a Second Amendment nature conservative or an outright militant socialist.
I mean, yeah,
I'm
a fan of that second one.
Yeah. Are those the only choices?
Yeah. And just the way that our funding for these politicians is structured, I can't imagine a candidate who would be able to give you a concrete answer on that. Because if they can just decide to throw $1 billion at your opponent, like you can't be president.
Okay, but let's get into
like that. That's my.
What does that money do? Let's actually talk about the important thing. What does that money do?
It lets you lie on the biggest scale. It gets you access to the propaganda artists that say, okay, these are the things that people are caring about in these areas. So you can buy eyes on the ground, and you can strategically like throw your.
Yeah, right. So that's the point. Is you're buying the attention of people to then change their decisions. The buck stops with us. The money backing for any of these politicians doesn't matter if we don't budge.
Well, but you're looking at the anti-Zionists as a monolith, and you're looking at the left as a monolith, because there are plenty of Zionist leftists, not leftists. There are plenty of Zionists that are left of the Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
But like there is a lot of debate and discussion, and there's plenty of Democrats who are Zionists, and so you would have to be giving up certain demographics to pick up others. I think there's a diplomatic way to do that. You say, hey, even if you believe in Israel and its right to exist and all of these things, we still have to stop funding it, because there is enough of a question, there is enough of a line in the sand, and there's enough support in the from the UN that's saying this is a genocide and we will not be a part of that. And if that loses me some voters, that's okay. That's
But this
the diplomatic decision that will lose voters, but will also gain a
but
lot.
this is my point is it's the voters. The voter this is where my hope comes in. The voters still have the power. Right? So it's like, oh, they're gonna lose some voters. The amount of people that should be like uh how would you put it? I'm trying to think of a good word for it, but people who are
Pro ceasefire.
yeah, I was trying to think of a more like general term, but like the people's interest is the interest of the people. That they're not followers, they're communities, right? Like I guess to use my own terminology in that way. But my ultimate point is like, oh well, your opponent will get all this money. That money doesn't matter if you can't move the populace.
Well, I mean, it has and it hasn't. Like, I don't know if you remember Bloomberg's like run. He got was it just anyways, he spent $1 billion, didn't take a state. Like that that that's silly and crazy, and nothing gave me more joy than responding to those text requests with "Go fuck yourself, Bloomberg." But like, so money isn't everything, and you're right. And like being able to recognize that is an important part of being a politician. But the the strings that are being pulled are the money, because it does a lot, and now you have a divide, like, because when it's just the left, then you have a good chance of taking an election. But if you if you go against a big power like Israel, they can use that division. They can make laws that say if you say you're anti-Zionist, you are anti-Semitic. That's that's a huge deal, and I think me a year ago would have been deeply affected by that. Like if I wasn't paying attention and then that came out, it's like, oh well, like this is like, I haven't done any research into this. Like, I don't know anything about this, but this is what Jews are asking for, and I think that is a huge thing to keep in mind. And since Jews have been a minority that I've watched, like, be kind of not necessarily marginalized. Yes, marginalized. They've been attacked from so many different angles, and I've watched anti-Semitism, like real anti-Semitism, rise. Like that is the kind of group that I would try to be protecting. But now that you've got that pitted against another smaller minority that is being attacked, like that changes things drastically. So the money isn't necessarily that you can just buy the eyes on the ground. It's also that you can throw gasoline on those divisions.
Mhm.
And I like that was the first thing that came to mind when this whole thing popped up. I said it on one of my videos. I can't think of a single thing that could have divided the left as thoroughly as this has. And that's so disheartening, but I totally understand like where it's coming from, because the desire to not be anti-Semitic, to not go back to the Nazi ways, is deeply ingrained in a lot of the people on the left, and even that idea is pretty horrific.
Well, and this is one of those things where it's the Hamas charter originally says to get rid of all the Jews, and does
So
like get into the conspiracy theories about and quotes the protocols of Zion. Like it is.
maybe we should go into a deep dive of Hamas history, but as I've heard it, Hamas was kind of like the Taliban in that the government kind of propped that like theocracy, that right wing theocracy, up to kind of undermine it, or to undermine the will of the people, or
Okay,
to
yeah. So here's the thing. There's a portion of history before that, and this is what I found when I did my
okay.
research that blew my fucking mind. It was a humanitarian nonprofit like community organization It just focused on feeding and housing and taking care of people.
Mhm.
That was it.
Yeah.
But it got so good at organizing that it started getting political enemies. And at a certain
Well,
point,
yeah.
they like the oppression got worse and worse and worse, and they were trying to just help the people in the face of the oppression. And at a certain point, it snapped. And they're like, you know what?
Mhm.
Like we're Islamic, right? Like so they went to the Quran, like they looked at the stuff. The logo on almost every major Islamic country is swords. They're like, violence is not against our beliefs. So they
Yeah.
like, but it didn't start out that way. Like people like have this weird conception that it started out as like this, militant whatever group. It didn't. It originally was, the very like Martin Luther King, like, well, we have these people, but if we just show that we're good, if we take care of each other, like we bring out the good in
Mhm.
each other, we'll like meet this thing. And the pressure just kept going and pushing and pressing, and then it snapped, and then it switched,
Yeah.
and it did the full pendulum swing, right? Which is where you get the original charter. But if you don't understand that initially it wasn't a violent militant group, if it seems like it started on that side of the pendulum, the concept that they tried to swing back doesn't make as much
Mhm.
sense. Now, to be fair, there are leadership elements in Hamas that have made statements about the quote unquote new charter, but they're like, that doesn't supersede the old one. Um, so there's two, but this is part of the like, it's a human thing, right? They're not
Yeah.
it's that monolith term used, right? They're not a monolith. There's actually a division
Mhm.
within Hamas as a concept because, like, right, they're elected because they're Sunni Muslims, so they believe in electing from the Arab population, like a democratic system. Um, so there's a group of them that are trying to be more progressive and be like, no, we don't. Like they did the whole like we're against the Zionist project. It's not that we're against because they had Jewish people living in Palestine that weren't part of
Yeah.
the migration from Europe, and they all got along fine. It wasn't until the
Yeah.
the Great Migration started happening. Like there's all this nuance to it. But it like so many other things, it peaked in power through the hatred. So there's a huge portion of it that needs that hatred to keep going in order for it to maintain its power.
So it may have been through the hatred, but where did the funding come from? Because like
That I
kind of the vague story that I've heard is that this has kind of been propped up by Israel to kind of funnel the give a head to the snake. I think I would say.
Yep. So this is not an area I'm an expert in. I was mainly just trying to understand it as an organization because I wanted to, when we did this video, rail against it as an Islamic extremist organization. Um, and it is so much more nuanced than that. So a bit of learning on my part.
Yeah.
It originally was associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. So this is where you get like originally, the other Arabian powers or Islamic powers in the area supported it, but then they started drawing back as it got more extreme. Um, and we do have to, I don't say we do have. I am under the impression from the various news outlets I go to, and I try very hard to make sure I'm getting pro both or whatever. But it seems very clear
Yeah.
that the current regime, the Netanyahu regime, propped up the organization.
Right. That's what I've heard as well. I can neither confirm nor deny. Um, but based on how America does things, I would say that that's pretty likely. Um, or pretty plausible, I should say.
Yeah, pretty textbook political
Um,
move.
yeah. So, and like, because I've read or I've skimmed through the second charter, like the recent one. I don't know what the difference is in time between those. Um, but from what I've seen, like which I know is all curated for me and going across TikTok, like the hostages were like have been like protected from Israeli fire and treated well and respectful, and like that has not been the same going the other way. And I've had the interactions and the reactions from Israelis to Palestinians. I just see that being more dehumanizing. Um, and like that gets back to like one of the articles I read early on when I was trying to like kind of build up my writing career. There was something that was saying that being in a minority group or growing up in a more minority makes you a better writer because you have to understand your perspective and you have to understand the perspective of the majority.
Mm.
So you're not fucking with their like with the rules that they don't even think about. Like you're not fucking with the flow.
Right.
You're not throwing off the Emperor's Groove. And so I think that just inherently makes people more empathetic. Like you can twist that. Like people can absolutely grow to hate the oppressors just because they're like because they're the oppressors. Like there's plenty of reasons. But that seed of empathy and insight is very valuable. And that's the difference that I've seen in movies from or in videos from Palestinians versus Israelis. Like, there is a vast power difference that it shows up in how they interact with the world and how they interact with each other.
Well, and because the one is they don't deserve to live, and the other one is if they only knew us as people. Those are the two competing narratives.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah, it's hard
I
to.
can't remember the comedian's name, but he's been all over the social media. He was on Lex Friedman's podcast. He had a TV show that was like the Daily Show, but for the Arab world. I can't remember his name, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. He's got kind of a buzzed head.
Mm-hmm. Like very bombastic. But somebody pressed him about like the whole Hamas thing. He's like, look, here's the thing. Like, if I come to the doctor with a wound, right? Like, I say, can you like fix this? Like, you're the doctor. What do you do? Like, oh, I would,
Yeah.
Well, it's like, well, you treat the wound, right? Like, you would treat the wound to stop it from bleeding. You know what you don't do? You don't take a hammer and smash the wound. Like,
Yeah.
like, so you want to stop Hamas's power or like the extremist and the violent power, stop hitting it with a hammer. Help them heal. Like, right? The humanitarian aid, the giving rights, the negotiations, like if they wanted a real solution, and this is the whole back to like when you look at how their actions relate to their intentions, if the point was peace and not propping up
There'd be peace.
the actions would be different, right? Like because it's common sense that if you it's the like if you antagonize them, you're trying it would seem, right, if you looked at the historical events from a strategic political standpoint, it would seem the entire point of the Netanyahu regime was the response from Hamas, which people considered a first attack. It wasn't, it was a response.
Yeah.
So it would seem like they were constantly pushing pressure so that moment would happen. They could go, see, look how bad they are. That's political, like, Machiavellian strategy 101. Like, where if, like, your real thing was you want to get rid of Hamas, because I cannot emphasize this enough, they are Sunnis, they're elected, which is where you get the Israeli narrative, like, oh, all Palestinians are bad because they elected Hamas. Give them an alternative. Like, give them the opportunity to do something else.
When was the last election?
That I don't know.
Like 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago. And the only reason Hamas took power is because it had historically a humanitarian legacy, and everyone was sick and tired of trying to do things peacefully. They wanted to. That is clear when you actually look at all the information. It wasn't Israel showed up and then the entire population wanted them gone.
Yeah, and like I would say that Malcolm X was an incredibly empathetic person, and when you come to the table, like from the perspective of we've been beat down, we need to fight back. There's something just so inherently relatable about that. And it's not wrong. Like a lot of people like kind of try to contract Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. But I think they both recognize the value of like and need for a violent revolution when it comes. I think. Uh,
Well, a disruption, right? Because that's part of the thing with the whole college thing and like the boycotts. They're like, what you don't do
well,
is you,
absolutely, they believed in disruption, but like, I,
because my understanding with Malcolm X is he looked at the history of development and reasonably, especially in the American history, saw the power of
yeah,
violence to help an oppressed people. In his particular case, as people gave him an outlet to talk, he seemed to mature and realize that he didn't have to do it that way. That it might be feeding a bad narrative. So he started moving things towards which that's the argument to be made about people that are not pro Hamas, but Hamas sympathetic, is that if you watch their trajectory, it started out positive, got very intense, and there seems to be a motion towards a more mature. This is why the UN is so sympathetic to them, is because
yeah,
there is a element of the organization that is trying to seek legitimacy through legitimate means. But every time
yeah,
Israel puts the violent pressure on, it props up the more violent elements of Hamas, not the ones that are trying to develop a more legitimate claim on the international stage.
right. Well,
So they have to have the opportunity. If they don't have the opportunity, they have no option. I guess that's kind of
mhm.
where I was getting at with that.
No, I think that's so interesting to focus on because like the recognition of Palestine as was it recognized as a nation? Is there a specific like termage that was used? Like
As as a state, but
okay,
it was the emotion was passed
but
to
but
be
they
considered.
have full recognition.
No,
Okay, okay.
it passed that it would be legitimately considered by the United Nations.
Well, but how can you do that when when you're going against sides that have absolute veto power?
Well, because it turns out their support of Israel is rapidly turning into the minority on the international stage.
Well, sure, but like with an absolute veto power, it can be the minority. It could be America and Israel, and they can still fuck shit up.
Well, and this is where things get really concerning as an American
I,
because
yeah, you're fucking right.
because that's pitting America against the world. Like that is just
Yeah,
bad international politics. Like that doesn't
yeah,
benefit
that's
America
a
as a country. America is losing
Hopper in a Bug's Life, right?
yeah, America's losing its power internationally to save a foreign like authoritarian state. There's all kinds of smudges and questionable things, but like self-sacrificing the entirety of the United States over this, fuck me. Like
Well, yeah, but what what protections do we have against that?
our military. That's the thing. When people make the joke about like America spends 6 times as much as the next three combined.
No, like no, the world would have a tough time taking us on,
Yeah.
but like because we can self detonate. Like that's the only thing that we have. Like we can blow up the world.
We don't even
Like
need
why
to.
would we
One of
listen
the
to anybody
reasons we
else?
buy foreign oil is because of like progressive rules against us, getting oil on American grounds, but also we have massive reserves in the ground, right, that haven't been extracted. So if we all of a sudden get cut off from the rest of the world's trade, we have all the resources necessary to sustain
Yeah,
ourselves. Unlike any other country, because we're not a country, we are the United States. Like
yeah. No,
wild.
it's
What were you saying? What is our uh
well, just with like the amount of concentration that the power in things like the Senate and our executive branches have, like if Israel can spend like $1 million on every single or even $1 billion on every single one of those people, like how intractable do you have to be to go against the world? Because you can say fuck you for your term or whatever. But
Yeah, you have to make it. You have to make it hurt where the money is, and at the elections. Because
yeah,
because again, that money supporting them, all the lobbyist money, doesn't matter if they don't keep getting elected.
but us against the world is what gives us the fucking Caesars. It's what gives us the dictators that don't turn over power,
Which
right?
is again the concerning possibility of a future
Yeah.
is the capital and the 50 districts. Which actually we are divided.
Ah!
We are divided into 12 districts. I recently found this out. Whether it's true or not,
Oh, really?
I didn't research it at all. But the Federal Reserve has 12 economic districts for the United States.
That would make sense.
And somebody said that we should start introducing ourselves not by state but by district in order to bridge state lines. They didn't say that. That's just what I thought when they said that. And I like that a lot. So I should do a video on it to promote that idea. Because I would much rather say what district I'm from than what state I'm from. Because I do think it unifies
Interesting.
people more. It's more fun. And it's giving away less private information. Everything about it is better.
Yeah.
So find your district. You're no longer whatever your state is. You're what your district is. But I don't know. It's the trouble is what we're seeing is like you and I and the people that are I guess kind of like part of the movement. It's your point is it's tailored to us. So like it might feel like there's a lot more momentum than there is
Right.
because there's the quote unquote silent majority and
Well,
being in a
but
blue.
but that feeling is also super important. Like, even if it is just running on vibes, that will pick more people up with it. Um, because there's safety in numbers is it's an inherent sense that we have. So when something starts to gain traction, we run with it. Especially if it's like this is something that I should have been fighting for, and that's a feeling that I feel pretty consistently. Like, oh, this is something that I should have spoken out on years ago because the information was all there. It just felt too complicated. Um, but like now we're at a place where like, okay, shit has hit the fan. Like, take your side. Like, if you want to come down on the side of Israel, if you want to come on down on the side of like the same things that other regimes have done in this situation, that's fine. But
And maybe we need to get to the next level, right? We separated Jew from Zionist. Maybe we need to separate Israel from the current regime, right? Because if a totally different group was governing Israel, the problem wouldn't be Israel as a state.
but that kind of government like isn't appealing to anybody except that kind of governor. Like the idea that you as a leader can't be questioned without questioning the entirety of the people. Like that is it's very appealing to one specific kind of person, the dictator. And so like separating it now would really only put other dictators in it.
Sure, but
And I like
this is the one state coalition like dream,
yeah.
as you integrate the current Palestinian governance with a new regime that creates a coalition between the two.
Yeah. And I would say that would be the kind of step that would theoretically be possible if these war criminal charges are pressed against the Netanyahu family that have been kind of raised by by the UN. But then like even senators in the states are like, we'll come after you and your family if you vote for those. Like that should be that feels like a hanging offense to me. Like threatening a group that we are a part of that we deeply benefit from to get your to get your political clout is
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
it's
That's why I'm like, this is no longer like a Middle East problem. This is an American problem. And
yeah.
and don't get me wrong, Americans should care about all the stuff that's going on. But unless we have the strength as a people, like through our communities, through the way that we interact with our own government, we can't make change, which is what we're seeing. Is that
Yeah.
even with all the noise and rabble, and it is starting to change things. We got to keep it up. Um, but like we as a people have to have the strength in order to help all the people in the world.
And genocide is the easiest side to come down on the right side of history with. Like it's the most blatantly obvious, like, which side do I need to take? And the only reason it gets muddy is if you think you're going to be on the opposite side of the genocide.
Well, and this one hits particularly close to home because there has been, like, let's be clear, a bunch of like either mini genocides, everyone want to call it, but there's been a lot of genocide over the last several decades. Uh,
Yeah.
and like one of the ones is the
Ethnic cleansing. Let's call it that, ethnic cleansing.
and then the larger scale genocide.
Well,
Yep. No, I'll accept that
yeah.
just for our use of the terms. There's been a lot of ethnic cleansing that we just people get kind of like a ooh that seems bad, but it is entirely different when this is the whole point to like what we just said that the American institution is willing to go up against the entirety of the United Nations in defense of one of a
Yeah.
genocide versus us like wagging our finger at China like hey that Uyghur thing that upsets us or Yemen
Right.
like or the Yemen thing hey like we need to like figure this out like it's different when America is like a secondary element to what's happening, not the only reason it can be sustained.
Yeah. Sure.
Partly because Europe's got its own fucking problems going on right now. Let's be fair. Like,
Yeah.
Russia's kicking ass.
Jeez.
Hey, if a world war is gonna break out, this is the country to be in. So all these people that are moving out to Europe, they haven't studied history. There's been 3 world
I
wars.
mean,
People are like, oh, there's been 2 world wars. No. You want to know what happened in the First World War, before the World War, the Napoleonic Wars? We got the Louisiana Purchase. Every time Europe and the Middle East go to war, when there's a whole thing on that side of the world, we benefit. Which
yeah.
is where you get the military industrial complex cynicism that America might be, just might be, trying to reset the board a little bit. That's where you get the conspiracy things. Where's my tin hat? I have one. Oh, just saying.
It's a good look. Yeah.
There is a theory that America, because that this is the trouble with conspiracies. That makes it make more sense. That America is stoking the problems of the world, and then it's just gonna weather the storm.
Well, and when you have things like globalization and corporations that span all these worlds or all these nations, and you can kind of watch how they're willing to buy and sell people. Um, yeah, that doesn't seem out of the range of possibility. Like the identity of the good guys is something that the boomers certainly have clung on to for a long time, and it's hard to get to somebody to identify as the bad guy. Like it takes a lot of deconstruction to recognize, like, hey, the things that I signed on for to protect aren't necessarily like inherently right. Like the even if all of the ideals that I held when I was 17, like I still believe in, we don't enact those ideals. We don't actually want to protect people or to stop genocides, like because we're watching us not do it. it's it's deeply frustrating.
Oh, we might have to do a part 2 as things unfold. We're at the questionable recording
Yeah.
mark.
I think that'll be good.
Yeah, maybe it gives more time for research, and I'm glad we're doing it now. And I'm just gonna post everything I have for video so we can get this up in a timely manner, unlike the last one.
Okay.
Because yeah, it feels like we're getting closer and closer to like a big shift.
Yeah, I mean, countdown to midnight, right?
Mm-hmm. So see how it goes. We will stay tuned and go from there.